And they said everything is for our better world in the future. And this world they're calling 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Let's roll next clip who is talking about this.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious programme for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, that kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Well, these goals sounds great. Who doesn't want to fight poverty or hunger? But is this maybe some kind of Trojan horse for something else?
Well, that's right. I mean, all of 17 goals are on the face of it to create a better world. But when you look beyond the flowery language and the colourful pictures, it all depends on everything, resources, finance, people being controlled centrally. You're talking about an organisation which is not democratic and not democratically elected. So the public have really no say in what the United Nations policy is. And the influence from corporations and individual billionaires with a vested interest is quite clear to see. It is not a coincidence that all of the countries together are going down the same path, certainly in the Western world, because they're all following these United Nations goals. But what it leads to, whether they say it or not, is a world government and world diktats on how you should run your country. I mean, they are not interested in different countries, different nations, pride in your nation. They are trying to iron everything out. And you look at the European Union, who are working in tandem with them, and the WF, who are working in tandem with them. It's all about central control and profit for the main corporations. The shift away from any illusion of democracy is quite terrifying.
Philip, Alex Newman is talking about some special kind of language, UN language. That's some kind of new normal. We know now that we have some new normal now, but it's this different kind of languages. Why? Just a second, we don't hear you. Okay, repeat.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. So Alex refers to it in the film as UNEs, which is essentially the outlining of ostensible reasons, because when you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they map across every facet of society. So you're essentially giving the UN and its surrounding organizations power and influence over every aspect of society. And this is, Alex refers to it as a blank check to sort of control and transform. I mean, they literally say that Agenda 2030 is the blueprint to transform the world in their vision. But these are ostensible reasons. That's the important thing, because on the surface, they all sound wonderful and they're very hard to argue with. Who wouldn't want a world with no poverty and no hunger? But if you look at, again, the trajectory of the United Nations since these goals, initially they were presented as the Millennium Development Goals, and then in 2015 they were updated into the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. What is the state of hunger in the world? Has it got better since we've piled billions across the world into this initiative? What is the state of global conflict in 2025? What is the influence of the United Nations? I would argue that it's not a net positive if you to actually look at the figures on this. And to Alex's point, they don't mean what they say they mean. I mean, if you had historically a relatively small number of people that wanted to exert domination and control over the majority of people, it would be suicide, right? So we're going now towards this sort of digital prison, because technology is the great equalizer for the few. So they need us in this sort of digital entrapment. But in order to get us there, they need to talk us into our own prison, right? So they're manufacturing your consent with these wonderful utopian ideas and trying to get countries to sign away national sovereignty. And they've been quite successful over the years, for decades, in doing that. But it's all about manufacturing the consent of the majority to have their lives more deeply encroached upon.
Last year, in September 2024, we signed in the United Nations Pact of the Future. And in this document said that in case of emergencies, and there's a different kind of emergency, and they can say what is emergency, we will give our sovereignty to United Nations, and they will make a plan how to deal with this emergency.
Yeah, well, I feel very reassured by that, don't you?
Yeah.